Hey guys, Ashley with Amare. So, few resources for you guys. We are located in Elizabeth and Highland Park, New Jersey, and I also offer virtual consults. So if you guys need my help, give the office a call, 732-841-0142, and our scheduling coordinator can help you get set up with an appointment. We also have our online shop. So all the products that I talk about in my videos, those are all in our online shop for you guys to purchase. On our Instagram, Amare Healing Arts is our Instagram. All the products are linked right there in our bio. Also, the online shop is linked, and it's linked in the description box for each video. So you guys can go and check those out. And then we have our online course school, the Post-Op Academy. So all of the things that you would need to know post-op, we are doing online courses for. So things like what kind of massages you need, when you need to get them, who to get them from, how to find a therapist like me, all of that we have online courses for. There are going to be more courses coming out all the time. So check in on that to see what's new and what you guys can learn. If you like my videos, all of those courses are exclusive content. All those videos are exclusive content. None of them are on YouTube. They're all in our courses. So that is amarehealingarts.teachable.com. The link for that is also in the description box, and it is also linked in our bio on Instagram. So I hope you guys enjoy the content. Ashley with Amare. I will see you soon. Bye.
Hey guys, it's Ashley with Amare, and today we are going to talk about when you can finally sit on your BBL. So some surgeons will tell you, oh, you can sit within like the first 2 weeks. You'll be good. Just no sitting for 2 weeks, and then you can sit on it. Some will tell you no sitting for 6 to 8 weeks. Some will tell you you can sit a little bit after 6 weeks. So there's a lot of like up and down, back and forth with this. We're going to talk about the actual science of what's going on with the cells that we are transferring, right? The fat cells. So we know that we have to liposuction or harvest the fat. So BBL stands for Brazilian butt lift. For those of you who don't know, I have tons of videos on it. Brazilian butt lift. That just means that we're taking fat from one area of the body and putting it into your glutes, into the gluteal region, right? So hip dips, either like the frame part, the shaping part, or like the upper part, the lower part, everywhere around the glutes and the hips. Fat transfer can also be done to the breasts. I have a video on that, but today we're talking about BBLs. So we're harvesting the fat from somewhere, and then we're putting it into the gluteal region or the hip dip region, that whole area, right? To give you more of a shape. There are several things that are known that you guys kind of know, but don't really know. So sitting obviously will kill the fat, but you don't know why. A lot of surgeons and like everyone will just tell you basically because you are, squishing the fat cells. Okay, but we're gonna really go into the science here of why that is, so that you guys can understand why the whole sitting thing is so up in the air. And then, of course, it's a pressure situation, right? We don't want to put pressure on the fat transfer. So garments that are too tight, garments that have a zipper underneath with a hard seam that's going to push up into that BBL constantly and cause some pressure. We don't want those either. So lots of things going on. But basically, we don't want to put pressure on the fat transfer. Now, in your mind, you think it's like a piece of Play-Doh that you're indenting. That's not how it works. So fat transfer is known as liquid gold, right? That fat that we're transferring. It's got to be harvested properly, then to be put in like a big container, and they spin it and they clean it, and then they put it in like a different container with a cannula on the end, and then they inject it into the area, whatever the area is back there. The hip dips, the glutes, that whole region, right? So it is viable, healthy fat that they are harvesting and then grafting or putting in. So fat transfer, what you guys know as BBL, is also known as fat grafting. It's used for many different areas. The face, the boobs, tons of areas, right? So I guess another technical term is adipose tissue fat grafting. And I have a lovely little article here from the National Library of Medicine. It's called The Science of Fat Grafting. It's a really long one, and there's a lot of like sciencey stuff in it, so I'm just gonna read some highlighted parts for you guys. But it's basically, the whole article is talking about the procedure itself, right? How the adipocyte tissue cells work, right? So what they are, how they function. The article starts by telling you the different kinds of the type of tissue. So adipose tissue is generally classified into two types: thermogenically active brown, which is used for heat, and then energy storing white adipose tissue. So WAT or BAT. So it goes into really in depth as far as like what these cells actually are, and then the vascularity. So let me explain a couple things real quick. When can we sit on our BBL? Just to give you guys a heads up, when it is fully healed. But how do we know when that is, right? So swelling from your BBL is going to come down at 6 to 8 weeks. The fluff fairy, you guys know I hate these plastic surgery terms because we have actual science words for these things. People just don't care to use them. So the fluff fairy just means when the swelling has come down out of your BBL. That is all it is. If you're waiting for the fluff fairy, guys, all you're waiting for is swelling to come down from your BBL. That's it. The reason your BBL is hard is because it is swollen. The swelling in there is to protect the fat while it's healing and while it's an inflammatory response that's meant for healing. So this article explains it, and we'll go over that as well. But basically, I want you to picture in your head, right, when we're talking about this, when we get a fat transfer, you have two layers. You have skin and you have tissue, right? And then you got muscle. But we're just working on the skin and the tissue here, right? We're not injecting the fat in between the skin and the tissue. I want you to picture this tissue as a sponge, okay? And picture we have foam insulation. If you've ever seen foam insulation, you know that when you like put it in the walls, insulation foam, it expands and it like fills the space to insulate, right? So I want you to picture this as a sponge. This is your fat and this is your skin, right? We're not injecting it in between to make the BBL bigger. That's not what we're doing. We're injecting it into the tissue. That's why they are using ultrasound in Miami now to make sure we're not injecting it into the muscle or anywhere in that region. We want to get it directly where it's supposed to be. So in this sponge, we're injecting spray foam pretty much into this sponge. Now, if you've ever seen spray foam, it comes out wet and then it needs time to set and it'll volumize. So we're injecting it into the sponge that is already your tissue. We're taking fat cells and putting them in the tissue. And then they need to go in there within the first 48 hours, like the first 2 days, they are already getting blood capillary connections, which is what feeds them oxygen and nutrients. So this whole thing about like, oh, we gotta feed the fat, just eat healthy. That's all it is. Doesn't mean you need to take in high fat intake foods to feed the fat. You need protein, you need avocados, you need greens, you need, rice. Normal foods, guys, is what you need to feed the fat, okay? Sidebar, eating salmon 24/7 will cause fibrosis because of the sodium content. Just free little tidbit there. You can learn more about that in my course about fibrosis. But we're putting the spray foam, insulation foam into the sponge, and it's going to go in there within the first 48 hours. It's going to make those blood capillary connections, which are going to start feeding the fat cells, the adipose cells, oxygen and nutrients, which is going to help them live, right, and become a part of your tissue. When we are talking about a BBL, or fat grafting and fat transfer, we are still going through, and I'm going to show you a picture, we are still going through the phases of wound healing. We're still going through homeostasis, we're still going through inflammation, and we're still going through proliferation. If you don't know anything about the phases of wound healing, that is also in my course where I teach you how your body's supposed to heal after surgery. So we are still going through those phases of that first 48 hours to 3 days, that homeostasis, making blood capillary connections to feed that fat, right, so it survives. And then we're going through the inflammatory response, which brings in all of those nutrients needed to make those fat cells permanent. So that's the swelling part. And then as the swelling comes down at like your 6 to 8 weeks, that's when everything starts really settling in and becoming permanent. And we're going to go over that. So really quick little paragraph here. And I'm going to stop, as I do with every medical journal that I read, and explain things to you guys in between. So it says adipose tissue is highly vascularized, meaning it has a lot of like blood capillary connections, right? Lots of vascular. With each and every adipose site attached to a capillary network that allows for effective exchange of metabolic products, so oxygen, nutrients, things like that. Due to its high capillary density and low oxygen consumption rate, subcutaneous, okay, keyword, meaning this stuff, not visceral, which is around your organs, subcutaneous, the stuff that we can touch, the stuff that jiggles. Adipose tissue, fat, has the highest tissue partial oxygen tension, 40 to 60 mmHg among all the internal organs. As adipose tissue expands and regresses in size throughout life, there must be parallel growth of its capillary network. So, what does all of that mean? It's saying that your fat cells have blood capillary connections to them in here already, right? And as they grow and expand, those networks grow and expand. So the amount of capillaries grow and expand. So how much blood and oxygen and nutrients it needs, depending on how much is in that cell grows and expands. That's all that's saying. Regenerative and proliferative potential of adipose tissue. So just to skim this, adipose tissue fat was thought once to be an inherent substance used solely for energy, but more in recent research has shown significant proliferative and regenerative potential. So meaning that they can regrow, right? Much of the Jesus, why can't I say this today? Regenerative potential of adipose tissue is because of ASCs of the SVFs. So again, lots of medical things we are not going to get into. But basically, it's adipose tissue contains the highest percentage of adult stem cells of any tissue in the body, even higher than that of bone marrow. So it is one of those cells, what that means and why I'm reading this, it's one of those cells that has a very, very high rate of being able to get transplanted stem cells, right? So that you can put it somewhere and it will grow like a stem, right? Stem cells. We're not going to go through this whole paragraph of science. We're going to go to the next one. So when adipose tissue is grafted, it is transferred in an avascular function and must be revascularized to survive. So what that means is it's taken out and it's put in, and your body has to make new blood vessels, new vascularization, so that it survives. Fat grafting revascularization is largely promoted by perivascular ASCs that release angiogenic factors in response to ischemia. So what that fancy little sentence there means is basically that revascularization, making new blood capillary connections, is promoted by certain factors that happen chemically in the body in a response to the cell itself being ischemic or not having any blood flow at all. So just by the simple fact of this stem cell being put into the area, your body recognizes it as its own piece of material and is like, oh no, this thing isn't breathing. It's not getting any oxygen. It's not getting any nutrients. And it starts making capillary connections. Keep in mind that is happening in the first 48 hours. So right out of surgery, we do not want you sitting, putting any pressure on that BBL, anything like that. It's called liquid gold for a reason because it's still liquid. It's not in its like putty form until like 6 to 8 weeks, right? So the presence of more fat droplets than capillary recipient sites will lead to insufficient neoangiogenesis and is thought to be the reason behind fat reabsorption and necrosis. Everyone's favorite word. You guys are always so super de-duper worried about necrosis, and I understand why, right? We're paying a lot for this fat transfer, and it's kind of scary to think that you have dead fat inside of you. But part of that problem is doing too much, right? So the presence of more fat droplets than capillary recipient sites will lead to insufficient neoangiogenesis. So meaning that the fat will die because it won't have enough capillaries. Because again, remember, these fat cells survive because they are able to get new blood capillary connections to them, right? So if we are sitting, if we are numb and we think our BBL pillow is fine, but we're really putting pressure on our BBL, that's going to kill some of it. If our garment is way too tight, that's going to kill some of it. If we are still smoking, if you guys, and I understand, yes, there's the nicotine thing, but there's also the actual smoke from marijuana as well. Guys, the smoke itself is the problem. Obviously, the nicotine as well, because nicotine is a vasodilator that will cause more bleeding and things like that. But the oxygen level is what matters when it comes to a BBL, is the oxygen level and the blood capillary connection. So making sure that we're not doing the smoking, the alcohol, any of those things, obviously throughout your entire recovery, but within those first couple days is super important, right? So this concept was first described by surgeon, we're not going to go into this whole thing, is referred to as the blah, blah, blah principle of fat grafting. Ideally, there should be an optimal graft recipient interface and good vascularity and oxygen tension of the recipient's tissue. So making sure that you are working out before surgery, that you have good vascularity, that we stop smoking well in advance, so our oxygen levels are really good. Those things are going to help with the fat, and they're going to help you recover a lot quicker. So after surgical transfer of non-vascularized autologous fat tissue, so fat, after we transfer the lipo fat into the BBL area, and the grafts are initially nourished through plasmic diffusion from the surrounding host tissue for several days. So even before it makes its capillary connections, the tissue surrounding it, so that spray foam goes in there into that sponge, and the sponge itself is kind of breathing life to keep those fat cells alive while it's trying to make its new blood capillary connections. This is where the expansion part of that insulation foam happens, right? This is where the volume comes in. So then as early as 48 hours post-implantation, new blood vessels will begin to supply nutrients to the grafts. Revascularization is the regenerating zone. Revascularization in the regenerating zone is thus improved by blah, 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 within these first 3 days following grafting. Adipogenesis, so those fat cells coming alive, from ACS replaces dead adipocytes in the new regenerative zone until 3 months following the graft. Interestingly, phagocytosis of dead adipose cells takes several weeks to months depending on tissue size. Therefore, pay attention to this. The volume of grafted fat remains unchanged for the first 4 weeks despite significant adipose death. So, we're all worried about these dead fat cells, right? We're going to summarize this really long paragraph because it's a lot. So here's what's happening. You've got the cell that's got no blood capillaries. Goes in there. The sponge is breathing life into it for the first 3 days. Okay? It starts to get its own blood capillary connections and it starts to live. Then, because it's in there without breathing, all the swelling comes in, which brings in bunch of things. Let's see. I think there was a point in here where I pinpointed all the exact nutrients that it brings in. I'll find it in a second. But basically, in your swelling, you have proteins, white blood cells, like other lipids, fibrinogens, collagens, elastin, myofibrins, fibroblasts, all these proteins that help make tissue. So in those first 3 days, as it makes its blood capillary connections, now like swelling comes in at the same time because of that broken tissue. And it kind of creates a bubble around it. If you want to think about it in your head, it creates a bubble around it and it starts like giving it, with those blood capillary connections, oxygen, nutrients, all those things. The swelling puts like a little house around the fat cell that has that new connection and starts making it into a permanent cell. So this is happening in week 1 to week 2. All of this is going on. Now this is what, again, because you guys aren't reading these medical journals. This is, and even if you did, it's a lot to understand. This is all happening in week 1 to week 2. So between week 1 and week 2, this is all liquid. And it's surrounded by swelling, which is liquid. We want to be extremely careful not to sit on it, not to put pressure on it, not to sleep on it. That's why a lot of surgeons will say no sitting for 2 weeks, because in these first 2 weeks it's liquid, it's getting the oxygen and nutrients that it needs, the swelling is coming in to protect it and start turning it into actual tissue that's connected. That spray foam insulation in that sponge, swelling is coming in to make sure that it stays in that sponge and starts to become a part of it. So all of this is going on within the first 2 weeks, which is why it is super, 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 super important, because when necrosis happens, it's happening within that time in those first 2 weeks. Now, necrosis can happen at any point in the healing process, but a lot of times I've seen it happen with my clients where they'll go to Miami, they'll be in these recovery houses, they'll have a crappy BBL pillow, they think they're doing fine, and then they realize like, okay, something's not right. I have this giant spot that is flat, like completely flat. That's not, and again, this is where it said, and this is why I'm talking about this, the volume of the graft remains unchanged for the first 4 weeks despite significant adipose death, because they take several months to weeks depending on tissue size. So when we do put pressure on that, this whole thing about like, oh, well, you know, a certain amount of the fat cells die, right? They get reabsorbed back into your body. That's kind of how it works. We're going to get into that healing timeline phase of it actually in a second, but it's called lipid reabsorption. So the fats get reabsorbed, the ones that don't create those capillary connections, they get reabsorbed by your lymphatic system. And then your lymphatic system picks them up in the swelling, they get taken out. This is why it says at 4 weeks, and sometimes a little bit longer, because the fluff fairy doesn't come until week 4 to week 6. And this is why you won't see much of a change for those first 4 weeks, because it takes 2 to 3 weeks. I know this is a lot. I'm going to wrap it up for you guys and make it a nice straight line. It takes 2 to 3 weeks for lymph vessels, which pick up the dead fat cells, the lymph vessels, to regrow. So that's that. So that fat is sitting there, right? The ones that don't make connections, still sitting there. The little cells, right? The ones that do make connections, they're making connections, they're breathing, they're living, they're in there. The swelling is in there containing the whole space, trying to get some of that stuff to stay, cushioning it, protecting it, giving it all the nutrients and things, trying to make it solid, right? Heal the tissue. That's the point of swelling, is to heal the tissue. So then you got those other cells in there that didn't make it. And at the same time, you've got 2 to 3 weeks where your lymphatic capillaries are starting their own angiogenesis, which is a fancy word for like regenerating, right? So they're starting to make new vessels again so that your swelling can actually be taken in by those lymph vessels. Lymph vessels are separate from blood vessels. By those lymph vessels, lymph vessels' job, the only job, is to reabsorb swelling, take it to your bloodstream, let you pee it out. That's it. Your pee is swelling. So that's 2 to 3 weeks. We're talking about 4 weeks, especially like in this article says, the first 4 weeks, depending on significant adipose death, there will be no change in volume. Why? And why is the fluff fairy coming at 4 to 6 weeks? Because that's when those lymph vessels are finally uptaking the swelling that is no longer needed and getting all of that broken tissue, dead tissue out of there. Or not tissue, but cells, right? Those broken cells, debris, any little things. Its job is to clean the tissue of all that, to uptake all the garbage. It's your body's wastewater treatment center. So with that all being said, at week 4 is when you will start to see the changes in your BBL. Between week 1 and 4, please do not sit. Do not sit. Use a BBL pillow. Make sure you're using it properly. Do not sleep on your BBL. Do not let a massage therapist somewhere tell you can sit on your BBL. Listen, guys, even if you've only had a little bit of shaping done, my golden rule is no sitting pressure on that BBL, no sleeping pressure, nothing for 6 to 8 weeks, even if it was a little bit. Why? Because we want as much of that fat to live as possible. And we want to make sure it's getting enough oxygen and it's vascularizing properly. We don't want any pressure on it, killing it, squashing it, any of that stuff. Because for those first 4 weeks, all of this is taking place. It's a huge metabolic circus going on in your whole booty area, trying to make itself permanent in there, growing things, and it's like having baby plants all in there that are trying to sprout, and we don't want to crush them, right? So that's where that whole timeline comes in. So making sense of that, right? Week 1, it's liquid. That first 48 hours, it's starting to make blood capillaries. The inflammation phase, homeostasis phase of wound healing is 1 to 3 days. That's where blood is. That's where blood supply comes in, right? Those adipose cells are getting their blood connection. Within day 3, 4 to 7 is when swelling sets in and is like, whoa, protect this area, make sure all this stays permanent, making new tissue, bringing in all the things that need to be brought in to make this all permanent and good, right? So we swell, and we're like, oh my God, this thing is huge. I hope it goes down. A lot of you guys say that during the inflammation phase. So inflammation phase lasts anywhere up to week 4, because then all the lymphatics kick on and it starts taking out the swelling that it doesn't need. It takes out the tissue or the tissue cells that it doesn't need. It takes out those broken things, any debris, anything it doesn't need. So then week 4 to 6, it starts softening. BBLs change shape, That's what they do. So it softens in the areas where the fat was put in. It softens all around where the trauma was. It's not going to shrink necessarily. It's going to change shape. And I say that in a lot of videos. I have a lot of stuff that I say that in, actually. Okay, so talking about the reabsorption part, right? Because that's all happening between week 1 to week 6. Now the reabsorption, or 1 to week 4, I'm sorry. The reabsorption. So the balance between the rate of lipid or fat, reabsorption, necrosis, and successful adipocyte replacement plays a prominent role in the determining final graft volume retention. All that fancy paragraph means is that the absorption rate, the cell death, and the success of the replacement is all determining the final volume. We know this. If the graft volume, so if what they put in is small and lipid reabsorption, so like that fat reabsorption from the fat that isn't used or that doesn't take, and adipocyte generation, so the fat that does take, are complete within the first 3 months time period, then the final volume of the graft is unlikely to change significantly after 3 months. So 6 to 8 weeks is the healing time. Week 8 is when the swelling is pretty much gone. The month after that is when it's like, all right, this is the volume we're going to have. However, if the graft volume is large, like, I mean, we're talking big, like 1,500 cc's each side or more, then many large droplets will be incompletely absorbed by month 3 and will continue to undergo absorption without compensatory adipogenesis, meaning that the body won't pick it up. It'll just continue to try to be absorbed for up to a year, resulting in clinically significant volume reduction. The ultimate graft volume retention is influenced by many additional factors such as graft microenvironment, vascularity, processing technique, and postoperative care. Oh, wow, look at that. It's right there. It says it, post-op care in the medical journal. Go medical journal. Wow, look at you. So again, the volume makes a difference, right? So how much we're getting put in. And this is what that very first line said when I read it to you guys. There should be a good interface vascularity and oxygen tension, making sure that we're not putting too much in one area at a time, making sure that it's evenly spread, making sure that we're not overfilling to the point where it's too much for your body to handle and make new vascularization with, make new blood vessels to feed that stuff. So, of course, many factors. The environment, vascularity, post-op care, all of those things. Let me see if there's anything else in here. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys. Hold on. Okay, so acute repair phase, months 1 to 3. This is what you guys are really like worried about, right? So inflammation is up to that like 6 to 8 week mark, right? Month 2. Regeneration is happening at the same time as when you're swollen, around that week 3 when it starts to go from liquid gold to like putty almost, or Play-Doh, and start becoming a little bit like thicker, a little fluffier, all of that. That's regeneration. And then month 3 is when that regeneration's done. So the fat cells will be regenerated and permanent at 3. All of this is still healing, right? So chronic reabsorption phase. So anything to be reabsorbed, anything that your body's taking care of, any of that swelling that's still going to be reabsorbed, all of that is still happening up to a year. This wound healing phase thing, this graft thing, is still happening in the same time as our wound healing. So if we look at our wound healing chart, within those first, homeostasis phase is the first couple days, and then the inflammation phase is the same as this, 6 to 8 weeks, up to like month 2 to 3, and then proliferation, month 2.5, 3 to about month 8, where your body's taking whatever's left in there and making it permanent tissue. And then scar tissue land remodeling happens at month 12 to 24, which on this sheet it said calcification. It's the same, well, because it's fat, it's a little different, but it's still those same phases. So by month 3, it says fat undergoes acute repair phase until month 3. And chronic absorption phase from month 3 to 12. So that's where that paragraph said if there's a significantly larger volume, it may take place still after 3 months. But generally, it's those 3 months. So your swelling and when you can sit on your BBL, We generally say 6 to 8 weeks. Again, I say general because the more fat you have, the longer it may take. So we're going to need a little bit longer for all of those phases to complete themselves. And then it talks about the acute regenerative phase. I think that's pretty much it. Let me see. Graft survival. I think we went through that. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. So when we're talking about when can I sit on my BBL, we're talking about those capillary connections. We're talking about the pressure on the fat. We don't want to crush the spray insulation foam until it has actually become foam and volumize the sponge that's already there. We want to make sure that we're staying off of it and not putting any pressure at all. So anything as far as sleeping, like you guys with your BBL pillows, I have so many videos on BBL pillows. Please, for the love of goodness, you are numb back there. You cannot feel if you are crushing your BBL. You will not have feeling for about the first week to 2 weeks, and then sometimes sooner, sometimes later, but you can't really feel what's going on back there. So how do we know when we can sit on our BBL? When your BBL feels like breast tissue, when there's no hardness at all, because those hard spots that you're still feeling, those heavy, tight, hard spots, are still the swelling trying to help those adipose cells acclimate, be protected, all of that stuff. So, I found this little part here, this last thing we're going to go over that talks about the swelling. So, ASCs achieve their regenerative effects. So, the cells, right, the fat cells, achieve their regenerative effects through parsinine secretion of cytokines and growth factors, with high levels of secretion occurring in hypoxic conditions. I'm gonna translate all this for you when I'm done reading it. These factors include angiogenic cytokines such as vascular endothelial growth factor, VEGF, hepatocyte growth factor, HGF, fibroblastic growth factor 2, and basic fibroblast growth factor, as well as hematopoietic cytokines such as granulocytes, colony stimulating factor, and granulocyte macrophage colony stimulating factor. Together, these growth factors, so just think of all of these as like other little cells that stimulate growth of other tissue. Together, these growth factors affect the differentiation of stem cells, including angiogenesis, regenerating, stimulate tissue remodeling, which is making tissue, and promote wound healing. Mature adipocytes themselves have the ability to de-differentiate into ASCs and then redifferentiate into adipocytes or other cell types such as osteocytes, bone cells. So basically, all of those cells that they're talking about, those happen in your swelling. So VEGF, growth factor, endothelial cells, things like that, those are all part of your lymphatic system. The bone marrow, and I have this on my Instagram, the bone marrow that they're talking about, those cells, bone marrow is lymphatic. You have 7 lymphatic organs. And I have them all on my Instagram. I will do a video about them. But that is part of your lymphatic system. All of that is part of swelling. So the swelling is helping stimulate all of this wound healing, this tissue remodeling, this regrowth, this angiogenesis, all of this, right? So ASCs are the main cell population responsible for adipocyte generation, fat cell regeneration. ASCs have the ability to undergo multi-lineage differentiation and vascular endothelial cells, as well as other tissue types such as bone, cartilage, skeleton, muscle, nerves, and skin. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to read to you guys. In addition, multipotency and density of ASCs in the tissue can also contribute to the potential for adipose regeneration. Thus, the blah 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 blah, such as blah 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 blah, inflammation, blah 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 blah. Yeah, I don't need to read all this to you guys. This is like the last part of the article. So Basically, what they are saying is all of that stuff, right? That is able to help the fat cell regenerate, all of those growth factors, all of those things that promote wound healing. Like you heard the words, right? And I know you guys, I'm sure your ears perked up. Fibroblasts, right? Fibrinogens, myofibrins, fibroblastic growth factors, basic fibroblast growth factor. That is all stuff that makes tissue, right? Like it said, it can make adipose tissue or it can make bone marrow. That is all stuff that makes tissue. We need all of that. That's our swelling. So when we have all that inflammation come in, it's part of the healing process. You don't want to have anybody rubbing, draining, touching, squeezing your fat transfer within those weeks. I know you guys, I've seen some of like the suction cups that you guys are getting put on after your BBL to help the BBL grow. We don't need to do that. Swelling is already doing that. We don't want to mess with anything back there, guys. So your BBL pillow is super duper important. Making sure that none of that is getting crushed or squished. We need that stuff. Making sure you're not doing squeeze massage where they're squeezing anything in that area out at all, or rubbing. I've heard some people will have a therapist use suction cups and then rub the BBL area. We want to keep that swelling in there, that hardness that you feel, all those growth factors, all those cells, everything that I just read to you is what's helping heal that area and helping make that adipocyte tissue. So those fat cells, and helping them mature and become permanent. So we want to make sure that they are regenerating properly, that we're not putting pressure on it within those 6 to 8 weeks. I don't care who says what anywhere. If we have fat transfer, we are not putting pressure on it for 6 to 8 weeks because that's when all of those inflammatory things are happening, which is helping revascularize, helping grow, helping regenerate those fat cells, because that's what it is. We're taking them from one area, pulling them out. They need to regenerate. They need to regrow. All of that's happening with your swelling, and all that's happening with the vascularization of the blood. Fun fact, one thing we don't want to do, like I said before, is feed the fat. We are not eating out. We are not eating a crap ton of salt. That whole wound healing phase timeline thing that I showed you guys is still happening, like that fat survival phase, that inflammation and regeneration. Because when you're talking about liposuction, you're talking about wound healing, right? You're talking about fat being taken out, and it's a wound healing thing. You have a hole that your body's trying to heal. When we're talking about fat cells, we're talking about regeneration. But in both of those things, there's still that inflammatory timeline, and that hasn't changed. That inflammatory timeline is still the same. It's 6 to 8 weeks. So while your lipo's healing, your BBL's healing at the same time, it's still 6 to 8 weeks. It's just one is a fat regeneration phase and one is an actual wound healing phase. But those fibroblasts, those myofibrins, those fibrinogens, all those things that I read, those are still in there, making tissue, whether it's regenerating the fat cells or it's making new tissue in that area where it was taken out of. It's still the same thing. It's still happening. The only difference is we want that stuff to stay in the BBL area. We don't want to mess with any of it. We don't want to touch it. So when will my BBL be fully healed? Like this said, so the acute repair phase, meaning that everything is regenerated, is happening at month 3. That's when you can really start sitting and be like, okay, we're good. If you've had a lot done, maybe a little bit longer. The chronic absorption phase, so again, anything that dies, doesn't survive, any kind of cyst wall formation, oil reabsorption, calcification, any other things like on that extreme end of the spectrum, if any of that's happening, that's going to be like that chronic reabsorption at month 3 to 12. So that's basically like scar tissue land. Let's think about that as scar tissue land. But you can sit on your BBL at month 3. That's when the acute phase, repair phase. So everything in there has settled and is good. It's going to continue healing and continue being better up to a year. And you're not going to see, like they said, much of that volume change after that 3 months. You're going to see it more if you've had a massive amount put in. But regardless of how much you've put in, whether it's a big amount, whether if it's a small amount, it doesn't matter. You're not sitting on that thing for 6 to 8 weeks at least. If at 8 weeks you feel back there and you have softness and squishiness pretty much all the way around, but you still have like a few spots that are still like tender, kind of like heavy still, kind of hard, squishy, but kind of like Play-Doh-y, like still, I don't know. We're not sitting on that yet. We're not. The whole thing needs to be soft and fluffy and good. We don't want to take any chances at all. So even if your surgeon says, oh yeah, 2 weeks you can sit, if you still have like a little bit of hardness back here or firmness or heaviness or anything like that, I'm going to say, as a plastic surgery recovery specialist, manual lymphatic drainage specialist, all around post-op care person, I don't want you sitting until it is fully healed at all. We don't want to take any chances with that stuff. But that is how the science of fat transfer works. So all of that is happening within that first 6 to 8 weeks. And then at 3 months, the repair phase, those regenerating cells have regenerated at 3 months and you're good. You can sit, you're A-okay. With higher volumes, it may take a little bit longer. But then up to a year, your body is still reabsorbing, processing, doing all the things it needs to do to that tissue, proliferating, remodeling, making it permanent in there. So it's not like, all right, at 3 months, you're done. You are done. You can go back to your normal life because the healing phase is done. But your tissue is still doing that whole remodeling, making itself in there thing, the same way that your lipo area is still doing the same thing. So at that 3 months, what is our goal, right? Our goal is to be able to sit. So we want to make sure that we are not putting pressure on it, that we're drinking 3 to 4 liters of water a day, that we're not smoking, our oxygen levels are really, really good, right? That we're sleeping on our stomach, that we are, with the exception of a tummy tuck. If we're getting different surgeries, that's a different situation, but we're not sleeping on the BBL. We're not using BBL pillows that compress underneath us, right? We're using ones like ours that is firm, that you don't sink into when you sit. So when can we sit with a BBL? If you are using a BBL pillow and you are elevated, you can sit whenever you want because you're not putting pressure on the BBL, right? You're not putting pressure on the fat transfer area. But when we're talking about when can we like be done and sit like for real without a BBL pillow, we're looking at 8 weeks, so 2 months to 3 months. That's what we're looking at. Generally, if you're working with me, it's 2 months because we're checking constantly. We're making sure it's okay. We're looking for those areas. Now, one last thing I want to read to you guys because this is huge. In our plastic surgery recovery textbook here, they do have a BBL fat transfer section where they talk about fat grafting. So you guys can see. Postoperative care. Mild compression is recommended on the buttock area to prevent reabsorption of the fat, of the grafted fat. Did you hear what that said? Mild compression. Guys, these BBL garments with the holes in them, please no. Please no. Please no. Your butt should not be hanging out in the world and then squeezed by a ring of fabric because you cut a hole in your BBL garment. Please no. Mild compression is recommended in the buttocks area to prevent reabsorption of the grafted fat. In the thighs, a normal compression garment is required to prevent swelling. The garment should be used for a period of 2 months. Oh, look at that, 2 months, right on track. Therapeutic manual lymphatic drainage massage is used over the thigh area directed to the inguinal lymph nodes at the inner thighs. Buttocks are one of the most rewarding areas to treat in high-definition body sculpting. Okay, so we are doing manual lymphatic drainage. As it says here, therapeutic manual lymphatic drainage. Okay, plastic surgery recovery textbook telling you we're doing it to the thighs, or I'm sorry, plastic surgery high definition body sculpting. Plastic surgery recovery, that book is Kathleen Liston's book, which I do whip out in some of my videos. So this is the surgeon's textbook. But the manual lymphatic drainage done to your thighs is to help facilitate those lymph vessels, to help facilitate that healing and that swelling and the fluff fairy situation. That is not me telling you go rub your thighs after surgery. Please do not do that. That is not me telling you go have somebody else rub your thighs after surgery. Please don't do that. But the inguinal lymph nodes in the front, which when we're doing liposuction, it's usually to the abdomen, These help drain that whole area. It helps with the fluffing process. That's why I say you guys are done with me at that 2-month mark, because all of that like healing, the blood capillaries, all that's happening in like the first 2 to 3 weeks. And then by week 4 to 6 is when the swelling starts to come down, because it's no longer needed for all that blood capillary connection and for making that tissue. And then at 3 months, your body's healed and it's good. You're out of the acute phase of repair. So when we're doing manual lymphatic drainage for you guys, I'm working those inguinal pathways that are going to help with the draining, you know, the leg, the glute area, all of that. But I'm not touching your BBL ever, 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 ever. Because according to this map, right, you have watersheds. You've got different areas in which things drain. By me working this, all of this will heal better. By me working this, all of this will heal better because it's all connected. But I am not working your glutes. I don't need to. And we need whatever swelling needs to stay there to help you heal. And at week 4 to 6, that swelling starts to come down and you call it the fluff fairy. So there's that. But therapeutic manual lymphatic drainage, this gentle pumping motion, which you should be getting done on your lipo area anyway. Just saying, that's the massage you need. But sitting on your BBL, we're gonna say 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, that's when we're gonna sit, is 6 to 8 weeks. And I mean, like, we're not playing any games before then. Not even in the car for 5 minutes. We're not even like just to sit for like 2 seconds. I forgot my BBL pillow. You guys know I'm crazy about that. The minute you walk into my office and I'm like, oh, can you sit? You're like, no, I had a BBL. I'm like, okay, do you want a pillow? And you're like, no, I'll just, sit a little. I'm like, you're either going to stand or you're going to sit on a BBL pillow, but you're not going to be in my presence and sit on your fat transfer. You are out of your mind. That is a huge red flag as far as being a therapist, like a manual lymphatic drainage post-op therapist. If we are having you lay on breast fat transfer or lay on BBL or sit on BBL area, we're not doing any of that for 6 to 8 weeks. Some of you guys don't even use the BBL pillow. You just don't sit at all, and that's fine too. But using the BBL pillow positioned on your thighs, I have a video on the product page, which we'll have the link directly to in the description box. But that is like the most important thing, is to make sure it's positioned correctly, because the last thing you want to do is crush that lower part of your glutes where the fat was transferred with your BBL pillow. And if you have a pillow that's too squishy, it will crush that. So no sitting for 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes a little bit less. It's depending on how much you've had done, what areas you've had it done in, and how well we're really taking care of this overall, how long it takes for it to heal. You can finally sit when you have zero hardness, zero swelling back there. Everything is soft and squishy and fluffy. Then we can sit on it. When there's no more soreness or anything like that, then we can sit on it. If you're sitting and you're still sore, get up. Don't sit on it. We're not doing that. Making sure your garment does not have a giant hole in the back. You want to actually have it covered with fabric. Ours has an actual power net lining on the inside to hold your fat transfer. So like they said, it prevents it from being reabsorbed. We're having that in that BBL capsule of our garments to make sure that all of that's being held and supported without being crushed and protected. Because a lot of the garments will just be a piece of like spandex, and anytime you bend or move, that spandex acts like cellophane pressing around your BBL, creating like a pressure gradient. So the garments are also super important for your BBL. That is something to think about, to make sure that you're getting the right garment and it's not crushing you back there. There's no zipper on the crotch part that's going to be cutting into the bottom of your glutes. Your BBL pillow isn't memory foam or pillow top, that it's like hard and supportive and it's on your thighs. And I think that's pretty much it. I really just wanted to explain to you guys the actual science of how your fat transfer is regenerating cells. That's what it is. It's not just like we're putting liquid in between your skin and your fat or on top of your fat that's there, and that liquid needs to like solidify. It's a cell, like a battery. We spray foam insulate it into the sponge. It gets new blood capillary connections. It regenerates and fills back up. That battery fills back up. and regenerates. And that's what this whole sciencey thing was explaining to you. It's a regeneration process of the cells for 6 to 8 weeks. And if at any point we are putting pressure on that or crushing it, those cells will not regenerate. They will die and then be reabsorbed. That reabsorption process is going to continue happening even after you're out of the acute phase at 3 months. If there's anything that still needs to reabsorb, your body will continue to reabsorb it. But that's not going to change the volume much, as this article said. So, guys, I think that's pretty much it. If you had a BBL and you're like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on with this, or my lipo area is super fibrotic, but my butt's healed, like my stomach is lumpy and crazy, schedule a virtual or an in-person session with me. I can fix that. If you're getting ready for a BBL and you're like, I don't have a lot of fat to transfer, I need to make sure that this stays and doesn't die. Like, I got to protect this as much as possible. Set up a virtual or in-person session with me. I will go through literally like your garment with you, sleeping with you, laying down, all the things you need to know as far as making sure that fat doesn't die, and taking care of your lipo area as well. So if you've had a BBL and you're recovering, or you're planning on having a BBL, you can reach me. Virtual sessions for those of you who are not in New Jersey, 732-841-0142. For those of you who are in New Jersey, we are Highland Park and Elizabeth, New Jersey. You can still reach me, 732-841-0142. Our scheduling coordinator will get you set up with an appointment. If you are planning to have a BBL, or you have a BBL, and your pillow is not firm, I mean firm, guys, like firm. Hold on. I'll show you. Hold on. Okay. The Amare BBL pillow. I put a giant piece of lipofoam in here because I sit on this. You guys can make your BBL pillow more comfortable by adding a lipofoam. So I'm going to do a whole video on this. This is a sneak peek. I'm doing it next week. Our cover unzips, right? I have one of our foams tucked away in here on the back edge, because that's where you should be sitting. I'm going to give you a crash course real quick, and then I'm going to stop talking because it's been an hour. I folded up our piece of our foam, and I sat on the pillow first, and I noticed where the pressure points were on my thighs. Like, oh, this is kind of like pushing into my thighs, and it like hurts a little bit on my thighs because I'm not sitting on my butt. You're going to put the BBL pillow forward. See all this space? This is where your butt's going to hang off. This is the back edge that you're sitting on. So the pointy part of your bones, like the back of your thighs, is what's going to go on here. I don't know. Let me back this up a little bit so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So when you go to sit on this, you're scooting back, right? I don't know if you can see it from my chair because my arm's on the chair, but my butt is hanging off. I'm actually going to take you guys off. Okay, so my butt is hanging off of the BBL pillow in the back, and I am scooting back a little bit. It is on my thighs. I am not touching at all. I can slide my hand under here. I have all this room under here and all this room back here. So this is how we want to be sitting. It's on my thighs itself. It is not on the BBL part. And that lipofoam that I put on that back edge really, really helps soften that back edge of the BBL pillow so that I can sit like this all day in my chair and not have problems. And I'm not like teetering or anything. I'm just sitting. I'm just leaning into my BBL pillow, and that's it. I know a lot of you guys complain about the back of the thighs or the sides of your thighs really getting crushed by like the hardness of the BBL pillow. Our pillows, you can get our lipofoams and just lay them on the top of the BBL pillow. Fold them in half, lay them on the top of the BBL pillow, and it makes a world of difference with the pressure, especially if you've had thigh lipo on top of your BBL. So I will be doing a whole video on that in the next like week or so to show you guys how I set it up for you to customize the softness or firmness of your BBL pillow, but still making sure that it's nice and supportive. So there is that. And that's pretty much it. Now I'm super high because I'm sitting on this thing. Guys, Ashley with Amare. If you need me, you know where to find me. If you need our BBL pillows, they are linked in the description box on our post-op shop. If you need to learn how to sit properly on your BBL pillow, link is in the description box. It's on the product page for the BBL pillow itself. And I'm also going to put, when I do that video on how to make your BBL pillow more comfortable, it's going to also go on that product page, so you'll be able to find it. The lipofoams are also on there, so you can tuck them into your BBL pillow and then also use them in your garment for your liposuction area to prevent fibrosis. The course. So if you know nothing about manual lymphatic drainage, if you know nothing about post-op healing, if you know nothing about what should I be doing to take care of this properly, like how is my BBL supposed to heal, like how's my lipo area for my BBL supposed to heal properly, how do I prevent fibrosis in my liposuction area, that's a huge one, what should I be eating, how does this whole like swelling thing work, because we're supposed to have swelling in our BBL, but we're not supposed to have swelling in our stomach, right, in our lipo area, arms, legs, whatever that is. That swelling's supposed to go away, but the BBL swelling's supposed to stay there. How does that whole thing work? I explain it to you in the course. How swelling works, how your body uses swelling, how to know when you're doing things at home that are causing more swelling that's going to turn into fibrosis, and stop doing those things. What you should be doing that's going to help get rid of your swelling. And most importantly, how to find a certified manual lymphatic drainage therapist. Guys, like I was talking about before with the massages, if you're going to somebody who's certified in MLD, they are going to get rid of the swelling in your liposuction area and help prevent and get rid of any fibrosis that's there. But they're not gonna have like full in-depth knowledge of surgery. You have to advocate for yourself, and this is super important. When you walk into that office, they're not going to be me. They're not going to have all this science. They're not going to have the plastic surgery textbook. They're not going to have all of this. In that course, I teach you how your lymphatic mapping works and how swelling goes through your lymphatic mapping and back into your body, and you pee it out, how the massage is supposed to go in what order and what sequence, so that you know when you walk in the room, you tell the therapist, okay, I can't sit or lay on my butt, but you can still do open the drains, connect the drains, all the things I teach you in the course. Like, you can still communicate to your therapist, like, hey, you can still do all these things, I just can't sit on my butt, I just can't lay on my back. So that takes you understanding how the mapping actually works, how the lymphatic system works, how your body uses swelling, all of these things you get taught in the course. So if you're having a BBL, please, for the sake of your liposuction, get the course and make sure that you do not heal with fibrosis in your lipo area, and your BBL is perfect and healed at 6 weeks and your liposuction is a mess. That whole area is hard and swollen and you're stuck in a garment, because you only need the garment for that acute phase of repair for the BBL. And you only need the garment for the wound healing phases of your lipo area. Once that's done, the only reason you will continue to be stuck in a garment is if your body is still holding on to swelling, because you're doing things that keeps making your body hold on to swelling. So the course is also in our online shop. Link is in the description box. And that's pretty much it, guys. This video was a lot longer than I intended it to be. I apologize. But I hope we understand how the actual like fat grafting BBL process in the body works now, like the timeline and what's going on with the cells in your body. That was kind of the point of this. But yes, we are not sitting for 6 to 8 weeks for anything at all. So guys, this is Ashley with Amare. I will see you guys soon. Have a great rest of your day.